Hey, welcome back. I understand that hopefully soon we're going to be moving to Fridays. So that's going to be a great time. And I'm here today and I'm very excited to have Tony O. I'm going to only call you Tony O because I know how to say O Pisano. But I butcher it so much because it's supposed to be O
Pedisano.
Pedisano.
Yes.
So anything in my life being a male, I take the peta out. Okay. So I think about this, and I know that I've had the luxury of you mentoring me for the past 20 years. Is that scary? That I think about, like, when Frank played House of Blues, when was that? Because that had to have been in 90.
In the early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah. Because to me, it was so amazing because he was my family. So when I would go, the only thing that would ever impress my dad is, oh, yeah, I was there at Frank Sinatra. You know what? Bullethead was the other one that impressed him because my dad is 86 now. So to him, like, and I have to admit, coming up from New York, because at first I didn't know what to talk to you about. Then I thought, oh, my goodness, like, I should talk to him about the information you've passed on to me. Because I remember that a very significant change in my life when I first started working at House of Blues, I started getting access to all these famous people. And I was so freaking overwhelmed and impressed by who these people were and what they were that I realized there was very much two separate type of people in the world. There were people that hoarded information and people who let you know everything that was going on. And that's what I think of you, is you've never hoarded information from me. You've explained everything to me when we did recordings, why we were doing it, what Frank's mentality was, you know. And that's what impressed me about you, because you're not hoarding information. Lighting guys, we used to make fun of them because they would have a million ways to shut off the lighting console that you didn't know about. Mm-hmm. Like they had all these dead man switches. Yep. So if you fired them, they'd turn the dead man switch on and then you're done because now you can't turn on the system. So when I see that, and I see that, like, when I saw you and my first interaction was, I don't know if you realize this or not, was at House of Blues. And then I thought I saw you at Nancy's concert too.
Yep.
And then I got to book Frank, and then I saw you and met you. And then my experiences over the time, I realized that a lot of the performers wanted certain promoters because they knew they were ethical.
Right.
And I always was impressed that you guys used me. I have to be honest with you. I use it. I tell people that all the time.
Well, both Frank and Don had the same opinion, that you treat everyone the same. Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. We're no different than anybody else.
But how did you work? Like, I can't imagine, because I went to dinner with you a couple times with Don. Mm-hmm. He just was always ragging on everybody. So was that like constantly, or did you have that?
That was his nature, but people knew his heart.
No, but I knew his heart too, because I knew with Barbara sitting right there, he was not really hitting on my wife. That, you know, and my wife is stunning to begin with, but I'm used to having people hit on her, but I realized some people were hitting on her and thinking they had a chance, and other people were hitting on her just to be complimentary, you know.
No, Don was well aware of what he looked like. Trust me, he wouldn't have hit on Karen.
Oh no, if anybody had a shot, it was Don, because I used to look so forward, almost more than his concert was him being there before. You know who else is like that? Is Cheech and Chong. Yeah. I think I had more fun with them in the green room, BSing with them, than I did with Don. With Frank, I was just so overwhelmed and impressed. And how did you handle that? Because he was a god.
I think the key to our relationship was that it started out as a friendship first, and then it morphed into business. In Frank's case, it was about 12 years into our friendship that I ended up working with him. He met me when I was performing at Jilly's on 52nd Street, playing jazz and singing. And Jilly put us together.
But the funniest thing is I remember Jilly's, too.
Oh, Jilly was a
And I remember all my friends that were in the family all knew about Jilly's, so I know that you had to be pretty connected to get in there and to move around there. Did you feel that, or was it just?
It came natural. I heard about the place. Frank did an album in 1965 called Sinatra at the Sands with the Basie Band, and he kept talking about Jilly's and Jilly's and Jilly's. I said, when I get old enough, I got to check this joint out. And so I started performing professionally at 17, wearing a tuxedo 6 nights a week. And I went into Jilly's one afternoon, and I met his older brother, Frank, who ran the place in Jilly's absence. And he says...
and Jilly was kind of Frank's manager, right? Or he was always touring with him?
He was a number of things, which I ended up stepping into that same position towards the end of Jilly's life, and then especially after Jilly passed away. Part of his management team, but pretty much a confidant, because Frank knew that if he asked either of us a question, we would choose our words carefully, but we would always tell him the truth.
That's what Isaac used to say about me.
And he appreciated that very much.
Yeah.
So that had a lot.
And that's a hard thing to do, is to look someone in the eye and tell them the truth, especially when they're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest. And I couldn't imagine. See, I would be so awestruck, I couldn't tell Frank he did anything wrong. He's perfect. And yet he had quite the life, because the more research I did on you that he just came up with over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I always loved the fact that, like, his loyalty to you was, did you ever have a signed contract with him?
No.
Is that funny? I tell people that 80% of the concerts I do today, there is no signed contract.
No.
It's just a handshake deal. And yet I know that Live Nation and AEG wouldn't even begin to lift a finger without a contract. And just having the Dolby now, because that's what I miss the most, is if Frank Jr. was still alive, he could sell out the Dolby.
Well, Frank used to say, if you can't trust a handshake, you could have paper that goes from the floor to the ceiling, and it doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, and nowadays that Frank would have a problem, because, like, there are, I was talking to Luann, who is my confidant on everything, how it's kind of funny to see Starbucks having trouble, because they were such a woke company, and they just told all of us how terrible we were for so long, and now people won't go there, and they don't understand that. I'm sitting here today. I will not pay $11 for a cup of coffee. I'm sorry. And coffee people are all the same. You drink coffee, right?
Very much.
And we drink like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cups a day, and we know it's not good for us, but we're the more fanatical. And then my wife goes there now and gets a Frappuccino. And I think to myself, almost sounds like I'm doing Don Rickles commentary. But that's the crazy thing, is to see that, and I see, well, at least someone's getting their comeuppance. When we were growing up through New York and through all the system, like my first interaction was a company called Grad 2, mm-hmm. and where I had Phil Collins play for me. And that should be impressive, but Phil Collins wasn't famous back then.
Yeah.
And I think 90% of who I, perform, or do concerts with, they were popular, like who knew Connie Francis? Did you know Connie Francis?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I heard she was a wonderful human being.
Very down to earth, very nice lady. Yeah.
So I want to get to this before we get into too much other stuff. So tell me your dating history. Because I heard through the grapevine that you went on a double date with Frank.
Yeah, that was an interesting evening. We were checking into the Waldorf Towers, which Frank owned an apartment there that he bought from Cole Porter years and years earlier. And he always used to tell me, when we get into the hotel, find out who I know that's in residence. And Elizabeth Taylor had just checked into the hotel very quietly. She left France in a hurry. She was in Paris, and some ugly stuff about Michael Jackson hit the fan, and she was defending him, and the press was driving her nuts. So she came to New York to escape. And so Frank called her sweet, and he said, "How you doing? Nice to see you. I got news for you. You're coming out to dinner with us tonight." She says, "Oh, no, I'm hiding from the press." He says, "No, there's no reason to hide from the press." He says, and I've already got you a date. You're gonna be going with my buddy Tonio. He's going to be a date. And it was
So you were on a blind date with
Elizabeth
Taylor. Life
Taylor.
is good, huh?
Yeah, I could never have imagined that in a million years.
Did you get a kiss goodnight?
Yeah.
You saw his whole face go blank. Like, can I answer that? Don't worry, everybody's gone. It's only you and me left. So.
And Angie Dickinson was frequently my dinner.
I had a crush on Angie. I didn't have a crush on Elizabeth Taylor, but I did have a crush. She was a policewoman, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Oh,
Angie,
my goodness.
Angie, she's still a lovely lady to this day.
Really?
You know, she's in her mid-90s, God bless her. You'd never know it to look at her.
I remember saying when you were 80 and 90 that, like, that was old. Now I know so many people in their 80s and 90s. And that's going back to what I said before. What makes you the person that looks at, like, a doofus like me and says, I'm going to help mentor this guy?
You know, it all depends on how you carry yourself and as I said, you know, Satchel Paige used to have a saying, the pitcher, Satchel Paige, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Yeah. The scary thing is you didn't have to explain he was a pitcher to me, but I know everybody in the audience
Some
needs
people,
to know.
Some people
Like,
that are
what was
listening
that? Yeah.
probably thought he was a luggage salesman,
Yeah.
Satchel Paige.
That's amazing because to me, you know, Luann has to deal with this all the time, where on my Thursday meetings, I preach to my guys, if you're not training your replacement, then you suck at your job because you need to train your replacement. And that what's going on nowadays, which I know, you know, everybody would have a problem with that you and I worked with, is customer service is dead. I was just on the phone with AT&T for the entire ride down, right? I'm not lying. It was an hour to get down here. I was on the phone with them on hold for an hour. And you realize that AI can be used for very good things, and it can be used for very bad things.
Yes.
And that would be customer service. Because to me, today, I still couldn't imagine doing a Frank Sinatra or any concert that featured someone who's going to be post 60 and having them have to buy the tickets online and not know where the tickets are, not know where they were sitting, understand the service charges.
Yeah.
And yet, Ticketmaster, a little bit bigger than me, has no 1-800 number anymore. Access has no 1-800 number anymore. The only way to talk to a person would be to call the Canyon Club. And we still, Luann, we sell like 50% of our tickets, don't we?
Yeah, maybe more.
Like people come to us to buy tickets because they can't just go. Young people, like if I book someone young, you know, Foo Fighters, you can do it all on the internet. And it's gone in 26 seconds anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I can think about Frank and think these people care about their seat. They're willing to pay for seats. But I remember you and I doing this, and you were concerned about charging too much for tickets. You know what I mean? And these people are legends. And nowadays, I don't get that from bands. I get that from some bands. You know what I mean? That some of the bands are like, well, I don't want to charge my... I am doing this guy named Taylor Henry, who's a Hollywood median. And, like, he's concerned with ticket prices because he cares about his fans. And I think Frank always cared about his fans.
Very much so. He said, you know, these are the people who got me where I am. And so it's...
I heard him say that so many times.
It's a two-way street.
And where is he buried?
And he's in Rancho Mirage at... there's a cemetery on Ramon Road.
Because didn't he want to be accessible to his fans?
And he's right. He's not in a wall or anything else. You pull up your car. There's no sidewalk. And the very first plot is his mother, then his uncle, and then his dad, and then Frank. And then about 3 plots away is
Jilly.
Jilly.
That's how I actually knew about that. As I heard that.
In that whole row. Well, and right next to him now is Barbara, his last wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I miss him, and you have to go through that a lot because you got to miss him.
So it's hard to believe it's been 27 years already.
Really?
And even Rickles has already gone 8 years.
Is that crazy? Because the last time he played, he had something wrong with his leg. And I remember us you sitting with me and let's figure out, because we didn't want anybody to see him. And when the curtain went up, he was sitting down. And I don't think the world knows about stuff like that you and I like orchestrate and plan out.
Well, I rewrote the show for him.
Right.
Because when he found out that he had this necrotizing fasciitis and he almost lost from his knee down on his left leg. And so he couldn't do the act that he had been doing forever, running across the stage and all that stuff. So,
I'm sorry, that smile just came up because I remember when he was doing he was so terrible at it too, the fake Japanese thing.
Yes.
And he would pull someone up from the audience.
Pull two guys up from the audience, and there were Japanese soldiers on Guam about to commit harikari.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, oh my God, that I wish he was alive, because I would put him on every television station all the time just to make everybody upset.
Just to give you a clue, we were doing a show in Chicago, and he used to try to find good-looking young guys to bring up on stage. So he found this one guy, and as the guy was walking up on stage, Don was looking through the audience for the second guy, and he noticed that this guy was limping. So he said, young man, are you going to be able to do this bit? And he said, oh yeah, Mr. Rickles. He said, well, I noticed that you're limping. He said, well, I just came back from my third tour in Afghanistan. He says, and I lost the bottom half of my left leg. So Don goes, oh my God. Ladies and gentlemen, this young man is a war hero. Let's give him a long-range round of applause. And they did. And he says, so what's your name? He says, Phil. Hi, Phil. How old are you? He says, I'm 31. He says, you're married? He says, no. 31, good-looking guy like you, a war hero, you're not married? Do you mind if I ask why? He says, no, not at all. He says, I'm gay. So Rickles bit his finger, and he looked at him and he said, my God, what action you must get with that stump.
Oh, Jesus. Well, he knew how to bring it down.
And then he asked, do you have a partner? He says, yeah, he's in the third row. So the guy introduced himself, and Rickles says to the audience, pardon me for being self-indulgent, but I've always wanted to ask this question. He looks at the two of them. He says, how does that work with you guys? So this guy fills this up. I don't know what you mean. He says, well, you're laying in bed staring at each other's eyes. He's, what do? You say, sweetheart, tonight we'll use mine. Tomorrow night we'll use yours.
Oh my God. And that's what Don had no id.
No.
Whatever came into his mind, he said. And it was always so accurate.
Well, he used to say that his approach to comedy was that it was the single best disinfectant to the most sensitive subject matters in the world. Mm-hmm. And at his memorial, which Barbara, his wife, insisted that I MC the memorial, I told a story. Half of Hollywood was there. And I said, at one time, I said, I was flying with Rickles to Atlantic City. I had him booked doing a show at the convention center with Joan Rivers. And all of a sudden, that one side of my face...
Is that how I met you, was through Joan?
No.
I was going to say, because we did all Joan's concerts too.
Oh, yeah. I put them together as much as I could. They were
perfect. They were the same people.
Depending on the size of the venue.
Yeah. When I did Joan at the Saban, and I had to lift her up, and she wrapped her head and legs around my head, do you know that she didn't know I was me? She thought I was a security guard.
She was a character.
But she was a funny person.
She was quite a character.
Yeah.
And so I felt this twitching, and I was thinking, oh, no. Years earlier, when Jilly passed away, Jilly Rizzo,
right,
who was as close a friend to me as he was to Sinatra, unfortunately, I'm the one who had to identify his body. I'm the one who had to tell Frank about
He died in a car accident, right?
And the car caught fire. It was horror. And as a result, between fatigue and stress, about a week later, I came down with what they call Bell's palsy, which looks like one side of your face was made of wax and you got too close to a flame, and it's all droopy.
You came down with that?
I did. And your face gets very droopy on one side. So on the plane on the way to Atlantic City, I'm feeling the same kind of twitching that led to the Bell's palsy 12 years earlier, and I'm going, oh, not again. I didn't say anything to Don. Got him settled in his hotel. went to my room, woke up the next day, looked in the mirror, and sure as hell,
Bell's falling.
the left side of my face was all droopy. And I said, well, I got dressed, went to the convention center, put the show together, went back to the hotel, put on a suit, got to collect Rickles, knocked on the door. He opens the door, and I'm standing there with my face all droopy, and he didn't say a word about my face. And he says, how's the band? How's the house? How's the orchestra? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. We go do the show. Show was phenomenal. After the show, we're in Don's dressing room with Joan and a couple of casino executives having some booze. And about 20 minutes into this, Rickles says, well, I suppose it falls on me to address the elephant in the room. And people are going, oh, geez, what's he going to do to poor Tony, for crying out loud? And he looks at me and he says, you know, Tone, you're in a room full of people who love, admire, and respect you. I said, thank you. He says, however, we took a vote, and the results are unanimous, and I guess it falls to me to break the news to you that we who all love and respect you feel that you are too short to play the lead in Phantom of the Opera. His humor.
That is his humor because, you know, because I think he called me the ugly guy because once he fixated on Karen, I was the ugly, dumb boyfriend. Oh. You know, I never got that thing. And and I always appreciated him because my wife, and this is a crazy thing, my wife would leave there feeling great about herself, you know, and we knew Barbara was sitting there. We knew it was all tongue in cheek. Yeah. And yet I just felt so comfortable. And I just feel so rewarded that I think to myself, I was thinking back at this earlier, that mentors, my dad's my number one mentor. You're my number two mentor. Howard Coffin was at some point my number two, but he passed away. And kind of you've taken that role. So I would ask you advice and I'd actually do what you told me to do. And then Irving Azoff was always, remember when, Luann, when we had to ask him permission to take over the Saban?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was my favorite statement ever was, oh, yeah, I don't care. It's under 2,000 seats and I make more money off parking than you will ever make off of that venue. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty accurate. And nowadays, we're doing the same thing where we closed all the little clubs. Because remember, Don loved playing the little ones.
Oh, sure.
Every time he went into the Canyon Club, he'd stand on the stage and go, oh, look what my career has become. I'm at the Canyon Club in Agora Hills. And I think to myself, and people always look at that wall with everybody who's ever played there. Mm-hmm. And they still come up today and go, did they really play here? Did Foo Fighters play here? Did Doobie Brothers play? Did Earth, Wind, and Fire actually play here? And you're like, yeah, they did. It used to be a hip thing. It was a super hip thing to play in these small little venues. And that was my first interaction like with REO Speedwagon, where I realized some of these guys, like Don, at least was Don. Frank was Frank. And he got the lion's share of the money. But there's some of these bands that they've set up, that's divided by eight people.
Yeah.
And 6 of the 8 people aren't in the band anymore. So they're paying all these people and only 2 people are in the band. And that's where a lot of that stuff has happened. And I see that with Don. It was him, right? You paid for an orchestra because I remember I would get the orchestra half the time.
Yep.
And, you know, that doesn't really happen anymore because I remember Frank Sinatra Jr. used to call me when he lived up, where did he live? He lived north of the Canyon Club. And he used to call me up and say, oh, I have a gig in Vegas. Can you get me a band? And it was like, and I think those guys are gone now. I don't know if I could get a band. Lou, could we? Could we even get a band? Like if you told me I need a 27-piece orchestra, my old days, 2 seconds. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm like, I don't know. I could go to a high school and get you a band.
I think I could still get you a band.
You think so?
Yeah.
I wonder about that because does anybody play with orchestras anymore?
Oh, yeah.
Really, they do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Who's still out there touring that does
Rick
that?
Springfield played with Santa Monica High School Orchestra at the Saban.
Right, but that's the difference. That's me. I'll do a high school orchestra because I know they have a full band. Mm-hmm. They're probably not the best in the world, but at least I know they have a band. All of the guys we used to hire for Frank Jr., those guys are pretty much gone now. And I used to get them for $150 a guy. That tells you how long ago.
Exactly.
Now what would they charge?
Yeah,
Minimum. I don't think that's minimum wage.
4 to 6, easy, 4 to 6 easily. Yeah. But you know what? I never had any inkling that you felt the way you feel about me being a mentor.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I had no idea.
I don't talk to anybody. Like Luann would know that because I talk to you. I literally don't talk to
No, I'm
anybody.
very flattered. That's extremely flattered.
Well, you shouldn't be flattered because I don't know if I will uphold your standards. But yes, I take your advice because if someone lived their life as great as you lived yours, I'm right there with you.
I've been so busy living it, I didn't notice, to tell you the truth. A lot of people say that to me. And
Well, you're that type of guy because you don't hold back information. You tell me everything I need to know to be able to do what I do. And that's the important. And a lot of people don't know that you actually were a musician and you're a singer too.
that's how I started. That's how I met Frank.
Right. And that's crazy. And when you met Frank, how old were you?
21.
You were 21.
And he, 4 days after we met, he turned 57. But we had so much in common. That's why Jilly kept saying to me, I got to put you with the old man. You two guys are going to be such a great fit. And decades of time just faded away. We did hit it off immediately.
Yeah. And then you're the same thing with Don.
Yeah.
And probably what made you, did it help you? Well, if you don't know, Tony O was a musician out of New York who basically managed Frank Sinatra for the last portion of his career and Don Rickles. And he used to play the Saban and the Canyon, and not Canyon Club, yes, but first it was the House of Blues on Sunset is where I first met you. So the crazy thing, did you ever get to meet Lenny? My head of security for, he was a bigger fan of Frank's than anybody.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And you know who Lenny's dad was?
No.
Lenny's dad was Lenny Montoya.
Really?
Yes. The guy on The Godfather who choked out the guy in the car.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And he was really affiliated. You know what I mean? That's what he was known as. He was the one guy in The Godfather who was actually a real guy.
Well, I was the firewall for Frank, especially.
Really? And then did they have to go through you to get stuff? And because the story was, especially in his younger career, that a lot of those guys were helping him and
You know, it was a reciprocal thing. First of all, most of the major clubs back then, and even when I started performing in the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of the clubs were owned by wise guys. And so out of respect, if they said, hey, when you're done, take a break, come over, sit down, have a drink with us, you couldn't say no. You know? And Frank used to have a saying. He says, yeah, I spent a lot of time with them because that's who was giving me that was giving me the work. He said, but just because I was hanging out with them didn't make me a wise guy. He says, let me put it another way. If all the clubs that I worked in New York and around the States were owned by Cardinals and Monsignors, I would have been hanging around with Cardinals and Monsignors, but it wouldn't make me a Cardinal or a Monsignor either.
Yeah. Did you know that the person who made House of Blues famous was the Cardinal in Chicago? Because we had our logo was the Sacred Heart, and it had the band around it that said House of Blues, and it meant the torturing of musicians. Oh. And he freaked out. And I was just like, this isn't so bad. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm celebrating the Sacred Heart. And the guy had a meltdown. But he's the reason House of Blues went worldwide. Because that controversy, everybody said, who would have the gall to use the Sacred Heart? Me, because I'm stupid. Because I thought I was featuring it. I did not know that it was a negative. It's almost like that when they have all these people like the Redskins and the Chiefs, and you think to yourself, I look at it as a compliment. I don't look at it like I'm denigrating. And then they explain it to me. But if you have to explain something to me for 15 minutes to understand why it's bad, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm not gonna really understand it.
I think people are just overly sensitive. It's gotten a little
But
bit out of hand.
sometimes I think it's just they have time to talk. And I think to myself, like when I was around Frank or around Nancy or around Frank Jr., I always had to choose my words so carefully because I knew that that was their one that one thing that was going to define me for the rest of my relationship with them. You know what I mean? And whether I came across, and I can come across, you know me well enough, I can come across pretty rough, but I can come across as a pussycat because I really don't care. You know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, as I get older is there's things that I care about and I'll fight you tooth and nail on it, and things I don't care about and you win.
Well, it's a natural reaction to the situation.
Yeah. So when you were there and dealing with the wise guys, see, I grew up in that environment. And to me, when you say wise guys, I thought they were importer exporters. I did not realize because I knew their kid. That's how I knew Lenny. When we were kids, I knew Dad was an importer exporter, and he was trying to be a wrestler and a TV actor. That's all I knew. I didn't realize after I researched him. Oh, you killed people. Oh, that's a little different than that. And I think about like all those wise guys. Like Bolger and all those guys ended up in Santa Monica. You know that.
Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all knew him, and he was a big figure in New York. And I realized and I agree with you because I remember my dad. I called my dad and I said, "Oh, there's this club that's going to hire me." When I worked for the Phoenician Resort, oh, there's a club that's going to hire me in Vegas called the Shark Club. And my dad said, "Oh, great." And then about an hour later, he calls me, "Do not take that job. It was owned by the mafia." And he said that once you go there, you'll never get out.
Well, sometimes they did things that were comical, and it wasn't their intention.
To be comical.
I was singing at a club in Brooklyn that was owned by the wise guys. And I decided, because it was a really upscale supper club, let me have at least a talk-through rehearsal with the guys in the afternoon. So I had all the musicians there, and we're talking through this chart, and the piano was driving me nuts. So on a break, I walked over to one of the captains that was setting up for the evening, and I said, "Listen, Tony, is Vincent in the office yet?" And he says, "No." "Why? What's the matter? Somebody bothering you?" I said, No. Nobody's bothering me, but let me know when he comes in. I need to talk to him." "Okay." 15 minutes later, he comes over. He says, "Vince is here. You want to go?" I said, "Yeah, come on." We go in the office. "Tony, this is Vince." "How you do, sir? Nice to see you." And he says, "So how can I help you?" I said, "Well, I need to talk to you about something." "Somebody bothering you?" I said, No. Nobody's bothering me. I said, "But I need to talk to you about the piano." He says, "What about it?" I said, "Well, it could use a little work." And he looked at me with this puzzled face, and he says to me, "What are you kidding? I just had the damn thing painted." I said, "You know what? Never mind."
Oh, that is good. You know what? I think about this because the other day, the guy who works for me, runs all my equipment, his name's Cameron. He goes, "Lance, you got like 5 grand pianos." And I was like, I have no idea. I remember when we first got into this 30 years ago, we didn't have 1 grand piano. Now we have 5 grand pianos. You know, you need a Steinway? I got a couple extra Steinways. and it's funny because, you know, what's happening in California is very different than what's happening, but with the minimum wage and stuff, so all 3-meal-a-day restaurants, all small nightclubs, all bars, anybody who has labor-intensive business can't exist. Which doesn't mean you go out of business, it just means you have to change. You know what I mean? And that's a lot of the things that people don't realize is being a businessman today is about adapting to whatever environment we're in. And you're right, because in California, you go to a restaurant, and a 3-meal-a-day restaurant, there is no waiter. There's no busboys. There's one person on the floor. You may have to order your food at the counter.
At the counter.
Right. And all of those things are entrepreneurs being smart. And that's what I really appreciated about New York and all the wise guys in the nightclubs, because if you were the same for 5 years, you were done. because all the clubs would open. They were the famous place, and there was always the Jillies and stuff. But there was all the new clubs that they were trying to do. Same thing in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I opened House of Blues up, it was people didn't conceive of what a concert venue was. They conceived of a nightclub that had music on the stage, but they could not conceive of seeing the Doobie Brothers or seeing Frank Sinatra there or seeing, Bullet Head there. That they couldn't conceive of that.
And that's the way it used to be.
Right.
I mean, the Copacabana, which I had the pleasure of playing at the Copa.
Did you know during the JFK movie that the Canyon Club, when they filmed it, that's where they filmed it?
Really?
The Copacabana was actually the Canyon Club.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Good to know. But it was a relatively small room downstairs. The intimacy was what attracted a lot of the entertainers.
Well, Frank was at the Golden Nugget. They have a room named after him. It's tiny.
Yes.
People don't realize that you think it's this huge stadium. And the first time I walked in there, because I'm a Frank freak, I was like, oh, my goodness. But I think it's only like 250 people.
Yeah, and the backstory is that there was never a showroom there. When Steve Wynn talked Frank into coming and working at the Golden Nugget for a variety of reasons, he built the showroom specifically for Frank to open it.
It's amazing. It's an amazing room.
It is, and Rickles played there. Paul Anka played. A lot of major performers played there.
Well, all those guys played the Canyon Club. I wanted, that's the crazy thing is when I first built the Canyon Club, it was all about how close I could get the audience to
the star.
To the star. And I remember when I did House of Blues, I had a 4 or 5 foot stage, and I always felt like on the Nancy show, it worked, but it didn't work because she was too high. So that's why the Canyon Club has a 2 foot stage, and that's why I kind of settled at 30 inches. That's where I ended up. But at 30 inches, it's the perfect level. It's high enough to see over the guy in front of you, but it's low enough not to make them feel like they're opposing on top of your head.
Well, I could tell you, you already know, but Don loved that place because of the interaction with the audience. They were right at his feet, and he loved that.
One of my favorite shows ever is Bachman Turner Overdive. Randy Bachman was on stage. You remember this, Lou? He was on stage. Someone had the balls to get up and go to the bathroom. He stopped the concert for 10 minutes while we waited for them to go to the bathroom.
That's funny.
Right.
Rickles would have said, "Could you hear us? Could you hear us in there?" And the guy would say, "Well, I could hear you."
That just reminds me of every time I'm mic'd, I have to get nervous because I'm the guy that ends up going into the bathroom and taking a phone call, and all of a sudden everybody in the world has heard my entire conversation.
Very nice.
And I pretend I'm all this nice guy that doesn't swear every 3 seconds, but no, I swear a lot.
Join the club.
Yeah, to us, it's just an adjective.
Yeah.
Don't be so offended. It's just an adjective. And I love George Carlin. I used to memorize every single, I could say that now, but those 7 words are still illegal to say. So I can't do his shtick. And half of Don's stuff I can't redo either.
But that's the funny thing. A lot of people, for some reason, in their head, they think that Don used to use filthy language, but he didn't.
No. But he'd give you a filthy image in your head.
He said a lot of suggestive things.
Right.
Yeah. He left it up to you to figure out what you meant.
So where was Jilly's in New York?
256 West 52nd Street. It's now called the Russian Samovar. They haven't changed the club very much.
But I heard when he sold it, when he passed away, his brother Frank, right?
Oh, his brother Frank.
Sold it.
Yeah, they all, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, he sold it in 1980 way before he
Oh,
passed
really?
away. Yeah.
And it finally closed like in the mid-'80s, right?
And it's opened again now as the Russian Samovar. And it's a great
How are these
club.
people not crazy? Why wouldn't you pick up the old official name?
Well, that's part of the reason why it failed after Jilly sold it. He sold it, and about 2 years after he sold it, the place wasn't doing very much business because it had his name on it, and he was such a larger-than-life character
Right.
that they wanted to, well, where's Jilly? And there was no Jilly.
You know what's funny thing when I stand at the front door No one has any idea who I am. They don't know I own it.
Funny.
And it's funny because when I was at House of Blues, this guy came up and said, "Hey, I'm Lance's father." He said I could get in. I said, "Nice to meet you, Dad." Because I guess that I'm such a terrible dresser that I look like a security guard. I have 27 of these shirts, 15 of these pair of pants, and matching underwear and socks. That's
You
it.
got to give the guy credit for trying.
Yeah. But you know what? And I ended up letting him in for free because he turned out to be a nice guy. And I thought, that's pretty ingenious to say that.
Now, see, Jilly was such a character. I could tell you a quick story. Frank was shooting Von Ryan's Express in Italy, and Jilly went over there to be with him. And Frank decided to take a couple of days off and just relax in Rome. And he's sitting there with Jilly. And Jilly, he hated wasting time. And so they're sitting around, and Jilly's looking around. And Frank says, "So what do you think?" "Nice place." He says, that place that you took me to the other day, they got great agriculture. They don't have agriculture like that in the United States. He says, "Agriculture?" "Yeah, that place you took me where you said the Romans used to fight the gladiators. You mean the Colosseum?" He meant architecture. Okay. And then he's sitting there, and 10 minutes goes by, and he says, "So what are we doing? We're going to sit here around here all day or what?" Frank says, "Well, what do you want to do?" He said, "Well, you promised you were going to take me to that place where the 15 churches." He says, "The what?" "The 15 churches you told me about." He says, "You mean the Sistine Chapel?" He says, 15, 16. Who's counting? We going or not?
Oh, 16 Chapel.
That's
a New York joke.
That's how you missed Jilly. That's who he was.
That's
He
a
was
New York
character.
joke because I think to myself because my dad ran wall bombs, and and I tell people, and I know the young kids look at me like, "Oh, this guy's so full of it." It was like I said, my dad took me to New York, and I took me to the butchers, and I learned to be a kosher butcher at wall bombs when I was 13 years old. And people go, "That's so dangerous," and you're thinking like, and my friend Tommy doesn't have an arm anymore because if you didn't work at the butcher shop, you worked on the fields and you had to put your hands in like a baling machine. And you know what I mean? And you have a reaper. And we were driving this heavy equipment at 10, 12 years old. We're baling hay.
Amazing.
And you think, and they're worried about being dangerous? Oh my goodness. The amount of stuff that I think to myself, how many times I almost lost a finger and Tommy lost his arm. And you're thinking like, and we would be like idiots. "Oh, it's jammed." You see us reaching in, pulling stuff out. You're like, and then one of my friends was using a back of a hoe to knock it in and to cook it.
Great.
But the hoe, he had it face down and it ripped all of his forearm off. But I think about, you imagine the kids talking about that today? I can't get the kids to go outside. They want to play video games.
Yeah.
And that's why you being a mentor is so perfect because I feel like I'm trying to mentor people, but no one wants to listen. You have all these people you didn't even know you were a mentor to.
No, I guess I just was trying to help as many people as I could.
And that's the difference because I took it that way.
Yeah.
I took it as, because my vision of Irving Azoff is much different than other people. Other people say what SOB is, and I think he's probably one of the nicer guys around, But even like Michael Ovitz and stuff, I had a great relationship with him. He treated me great because I ran House of Blues, and his son was a freaky concert goer, so I would take care of his son all the time. And you knew James Caan, didn't you?
Yes.
Did you know James Caan? Do you remember the story of House of Blues with James Caan?
No.
So he was out front,
Yeah.
and he was messing with Lenny, no less.
Okay.
And it's when he broke his leg because he was doing that. And, of course, Lenny started to go after him, and he jumped over the wall. But if you went to House of Blues, that wall was the parking lot, and you fell 30 feet on top
On the
of a
other
car.
side.
And we used to look at people, and then we would warn them, don't jump on that wall, because they would go, because it was right near the entrance.
Sure.
Brings me back to my Foo Fighters. So what other bands, so how is your book doing? Are you on the bestseller?
It's doing pretty well. It's been for sale now for wow, going on 4 years already.
Really?
But it's been for sale. The United States, Canada, South America, Australia, Japan, Great Britain, Spain, Italy. And believe it or not, last year they sent me a copy. They translated it, and it's being sold in Estonia.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And why Estonia?
I don't know why they picked
Oh.
it, but for some reason it's for sale over there and doing okay over there too.
So the book's name is Sinatra and Me
In the wee small hours.
in the wee small hours. So it's all your stories about Sinatra. Did you talk about Don Rickles in here too?
Oh yeah.
Or are you going to do a second book on Don?
That's what they're suggesting that I probably should, because I managed Rickles for 24 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But you met him through Frank, right?
I met Don, believe it or not, on my own. It was 1980. I was under contract at Harrah's in Lake Tahoe, and I was doing a 6-nighter. And on my night off, I saw that he was in the main showroom with this, at the time, unknown singer by the name of Patti LaBelle, opening for him. And so I talked to the entertainment director. I says, geez, I'd love to go see Rickles work. The last time he was in New York at the Copa, I couldn't make it because I was working in another club, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'll set it up for you. Fine. And so towards the end of the show, as you know, they always hand Don a piece of paper to talk about upcoming things in his career and different people in the audience that he should introduce.
You remember that? They would do that every show.
Yes. And then I ended up, when I was managing him, I'm the one who ended up doing
Calling
that
people
with
out?
with the paper. And yeah. So anyway, the entertainment director put my name on the paper. Now, as you know, my full name is Tony Opedisano.
Right.
Okay. And so towards the end, he says, and ladies and gentlemen, we have a young performer in the audience who's making a lot of noise here at the State Line Cabaret. Please give a very warm welcome to Tony, and he's looking down at the paper, Tony Hop in the Sauna? How the hell do you pronounce this? He says to me.
I would have assumed he would call you a pedophile. Because I just knowing him, he probably got stumped, and then his brain was thinking, how funny can I make this?
So he says, Opedisano. Oh, is that Italian? I said, it's Sicilian. And he dropped the mic and he put his hands up in the air like someone pulled a gun on him.
Yeah.
You know, typical Rickles. Yeah. So I went backstage after, and at that point, when he found out that at that point I knew Frank already for 8 years, all of a sudden we became pals. And 12 years later, I ended up starting to manage him.
So how old were you when you managed him, when you started?
I was 41.
Wow. So the majority, even though you were a musician, majority of your career, you've been a manager.
Yeah, I performed. I started.
And you never intended on being a manager, did you?
No, what ended up happening in the early 80s, after I recorded 6 tunes with Nelson Riddle's orchestra, just to try to really get my career. I was under contract at Caesars. I was under contract at Harrah's. But the music business was changing drastically. They didn't want to hear the Great American Songbook or jazz. They wanted disco and grunge and heavy metal. And no, that's not for me.
I don't picture you grunge.
No, so I started producing TV and managing talent. That's how I got into that end of the business. Yeah.
And that's, that kind of defined your career right there. And I think today I see you because I knew you because you would always, nothing was just the just. You always were doing a film in addition to this and in addition to that you were doing, because I honestly still think I have some of the DVDs from Don's show, because I remember you and I were putting something together and you had filmed it, you had me film it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just gotten those new 16 robotic cameras, which nowadays it's embarrassing. It's kind of like I saw someone the other day with a VHS tape and thinking like, oh my goodness, that we lived our lives, didn't we? That because do you remember Betamax?
Oh, sure.
And then you have to remember CD-ROMs and then DVDs and now a DVD. Do you even have a DVD player?
I still do.
You do and I do. But like all normal people, the kids, because I realized I have a cabin up in Park City, I could get rid of all of TV and just get a DVD player and have everything hooked up to a DVD player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because nowadays you watch news and you want to jump off the top of a building after you finish watching the news.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. So I want to say this because we're finishing up on time, that Johnny Carson is how I was first introduced to Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles, because I think the interactions between Johnny, Frank, and Don are so hilarious.
Yes. And I'll tell you a great story. They were both on the Tonight Show one time. Don surprised Frank. And Frank told a story that Don used to tell all the time, where he was in Las Vegas and he was trying to score with this young lady. And she said, oh, my God, she saw Frank across the room. She said, do you know Frank Sinatra? And he says, of course. And she says, oh, I would love to meet him. So Rickles goes over and he says, Frank, it would be great if you could come by and say hello. I'm trying to score with this girl. He says, okay. Now, I'm going to tell you the full story because Sinatra told this story on The Tonight Show, but he didn't tell the full story, and Rickles rarely told the full story. Okay. So Frank waited about 10, 15 minutes, goes to the men's room. When he comes back, he stops in front of Don and this lady, and he says, Don, how are you? Nice to see you. And Rickles says, Frank, can't you see I'm busy, for crying out loud? Leave me alone. All right. Everybody laughed, and that's the way they used to end the story. However, Frank went back to his table, and when he saw that Don was really making headway with this girl, he figured, okay, now it's my turn. And he had his 2 security guards walk over, pick up Rickles, chair and all, and throw him out of the club.
Really?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Uh-huh.
So, but I remember that, and I also remember a clip of, like, it's funny because they just redid it. He was at the National Honors something where he was doing a whole thing for Reagan. And I thought he offended everybody.
Yeah.
Didn't matter whether you were the president or you were the busboy.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about Reagan, as being that you brought it up. Sinatra and Dean Martin were doing a benefit to raise money to help.
Oh, happy birthday, Dina.
Yes, happy birthday, Dina. They were trying to raise money to help Reagan become the governor. Forget politics.
Yeah.
He was their friend.
Right.
Okay.
He was an actor.
So they're on stage, and Dean says to Frank, you know, Frank, if he becomes the governor, I wonder if he would give me a present. Frank says, what kind of present? He said, something I've always wanted. He said, like what? He said, Alcatraz. Frank says, Alcatraz? Dean says, yeah, Frank, it's something I've always wanted. A house on the rocks with water on the side.
Ah. That's good. And thank you, Tony, for coming in again. I do appreciate you. You are one of my mentors. You don't get a commission, but I thank God every day I got to meet you. I'm very flattered, and it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for asking me. And thank you. And remember, go out and buy Sinatra and Me, In the Wee Small Hours. And we'll see you again next week. Remember, we're moving to Fridays.